networks for smart cities. How utilities are leveraging smart grid networks to improve their cities. A few housekeeping notes we'd like to mention. For best results in viewing the presentation, we recommend using a wired high-speed internet connection, as wireless connections can be unpredictable. If you cannot get adequate sound from your computer speakers, you may dial into the audio portion using the telephone number listed in the right-hand panel of your interface under the audio section. Following the presentation, we will have a brief question and answer period. You may submit your questions at any time using the interface on your screen. Today's speakers are Brandon Davito, VP of Smart Cities, Silver Spring Network; Joe Svachula, Vice President of Engineering and Smart Grid at ComEd. I'd now like to turn the floor over to our host, Brandon Davito, to kick off today's event. Brandon, welcome to the event. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, PJ. And welcome to all our guests. We're very excited about this topic and very happy that you're all able to join us. So today we wanted to talk a little bit more with ComEd, who has deployed a multi-application network, primarily initially for their smart grid and smart metering deployment, but are very progressive in thinking about other applications that can run on the same technology. We're excited to partner with ComEd and are looking forward to helping them realize their vision for Smart Energy Illinois and smart cities. First, a little bit of background on Silver Spring. Silver Spring has initially developed the depth in smart metering and has worked extensively with over 20 million customers, homes and businesses that have been networked around the world. It is the proven network for connecting multiple applications and smart city devices onto a common network infrastructure that is able to power not only significant smart city deployments, but also the energy deployments that have been around the world, including the US, Brazil, Europe, South America, and Asia. We work with partners in smart city and smart energy projects and have a broad set of ecosystem partners that we've been able to partner with. So why Silver Spring? Why have our customers chosen us? The first is that we fundamentally believe in standards-based technology. We were one of the first to adopt IPv6 and have really pushed and built the largest IPv6 networks in the world. We're also partnering very closely with the TALK Consortium, which is a way to be able to separate and work closely with multiple control central management systems, as well as different outdoor networks that control streetlights. Finally, we're one of the founding partners for WISUN, which is a consortium of leading industry players looking to standardize networking technologies for smart energy and smart city applications. In addition, we're proven. We have some of the largest IPv6 networks in the world and over 20 million devices around the world that have been connected onto the same network infrastructure. We are also working with many of the leading cities throughout the world, and there's over 500 cities in 15 countries who have used Silver Spring technology. We've been working on multiple applications, as I mentioned. Starting out, and the focus of today's conversation will be around smart cities, but building on the same smart energy infrastructure that connects meters, transformers, distribution automation assets, as well as a number of smart home devices that have been deployed globally. And security. We've met the challenge of some of the most challenging security requirements from federal and local regulators, and have private keys and a number of significant investment in developing a secure, highly reliable network. In addition, we believe firmly in vendor choice, and as part of the partner ecosystem that we discussed, we work with a number of different application and device manufacturers to allow for our customers to be able to choose the best technology that meets their needs. And when we're talking about smart cities and multiple applications, we firmly believe that streetlights are a very exciting and interesting opportunity to be able to bring out canopy networks for cities throughout the globe. The great thing about streetlights is that they have great network connectivity characteristics, so they're able to they have great line of sight, They're paced at a regular spacing throughout the city, and they typically have power throughout the day. That allows a number of different assets, from cabinet controls to bus stops to electric vehicle chargers to bike rental stations and parking devices, all to be connected to that same infrastructure and be communicated and controlled via central software. We're very excited to partner with cities and leading utilities throughout the world to be able to deliver a smart city vision that connects all of these different devices and allows control and interoperability at the edge, where distributed intelligence is able to allow all of the different devices to communicate with each other using our mesh networking technology. Let's describe some of the projects that we've been partnering with leading utilities and cities to be able to deliver. We'll spend a lot of time talking about ComEd's project, where we are connecting 800 lights that will be LED replacements in 2 villages in the ComEd suburbs. Those cities will also have access to streetlight vision and to be able to control and manage the lights in the cities, and then have a roadmap to be able to connect other assets, including water devices, water meters, onto that same network. We've partnered with leading utilities and then also a number of cities, primarily in Europe, focusing on smart city infrastructure. So the city of Copenhagen, as an example, we're working with Citiloom, who's a global services company, to deploy and manage 20,000 LED luminaires to deliver 65% energy savings for the city of Copenhagen. They're also exploring how to integrate traffic and lighting systems together so that presence for vehicles, pedestrians, as well as the over 50% of Copenhagen residents who bike to work can be managing the lighting levels on the road. And they're very excited to partner with Silver Spring to create a smart city network that can connect multiple devices and different applications in the future. We're also working with Avesa, who's the services company and provider for the city of Paris, to connect 16,000 cabinets that will control all of the 80,000 lights throughout the city. That will save significant operational costs as well as dramatic energy savings throughout the term of the project. With that, I'd like to turn over to Joe, who will describe a little bit more about ComEd's vision and how it's partnering with its villages and cities to deliver a smart city vision.
Thank you, Brandon. It's exciting times in the utility space. As a 27-year utility employee, as an electrical engineer, I never thought I'd be talking to everybody, including my team, about water meters. So there's lots of change going on. It's exciting times, and a lot of the emerging technology is enabling what we're going to talk about today. So we start here with just a simple definition of our view of a smart city, and it's not something that would be difficult to find on the internet, and a lot of people are gravitating towards a definition like this, but it's basically a community that uses information and communication technology to enhance its livability, its workability, and its sustainability. So it's basically taking infrastructure, turning it smart, with networks, collecting information, acting on the data, and delivering value and benefits that didn't otherwise exist. A couple of examples around livability. We're talking about improving quality of life, increasing security, reducing crime, with workability, making equipment more efficient, the ease with which something can be implemented. And then on sustainability, can we find a way to reduce energy usage? Can we create systems and processes that are enduring? So moving on to the next slide. People ask why the electric utility wants to be in this smart city, the emerging smart city space. And our simple answer is that we believe that the smart grid that we're in the process of building out is basically the foundation and the building blocks of a smart city. The same fundamental concepts apply. We're taking technology, we're taking data, we're using information, and we're making this infrastructure smart and more efficient. And I know you'll get these slides after the webinar, but feel free to look at some of the ideas that are emerging, and you'll see them in the little bubbles, but this concept of a network where we're starting to connect everything, and new opportunity is emerging every day. At ComEd, we started with the definition you saw on page 1, and then we broke out into 7 different verticals. And the green boxes on this slide represent infrastructure opportunities, and the red boxes represent city services. And we brought cross-functional teams together. We brainstormed on each of these areas. We benchmarked with some of the cities Brandon mentioned in Europe and elsewhere around the world to try to understand emerging opportunities or smart city applications. And we visited with our senior team, and we basically whittled that list down to about 32 opportunities. And we're in the process of prioritizing, trying to understand the opportunity set in a lot more detail and to build business cases around each of the 32 applications. And we'll dive a little deeper with a couple of the more obvious use cases. The next slide backs us up a little bit, and I think when we go around talking with people, there's maybe a little misunderstanding of what smart grid is. And we tried to show some of the fundamental building blocks of smart grid on this slide. And when I say there's a misunderstanding, I think people gravitate towards meters, and they think the smart grid is smart meters. And it's certainly a huge component of the smart grid. But the smart grid, the communication network that emerges, also allows us to start doing analytics to understand customer usage, to educate customers, to allow them, to empower them to control their energy. It allows solar and storage, wind, distributed renewables, intermittent resources to be interconnected into the grid. It increases our visibility onto the distribution system, where we can start to understand voltages and concerns that we as engineers have about how our system is operating. It allows electric vehicles to be integrated, and it allows the utility to control how those electric vehicles interact with our system in a way we can use demand response tools. So it gives us the control we need. And the red box is the most important, and that's the communication network that links everything together. And that's what Brandon opened and talked a little about. I really like this picture on the next slide. I've shown this often, but this is a simulation that Silver Springs ran for us. And what you can see, if you look at the slide, are a bunch of yellow push pins, we'll call them, and green push pins. And the yellow push pins represent electric meters that are in what we call the innovation corridor. So these are meters in service in the ComEd service territory. They've been up and running for a couple of years. And the red represents the communication path. So the mesh is always reforming, and the meters are talking to each other. The green pins represent streetlights, LED streetlights that have been turned smart. Again, it's a simulation, but what you'd see, if you look, is the red tends to gather and collect at the streetlights. So if you look at that, you'll see that the meters seek out the streetlight, and that makes sense because if you have an RF mesh network, it's looking for the shortest path. Once it finds its way to a streetlight, it's a backbone, if you will. And bang, 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 these things hop all the way back to the endpoints. And what you've really done, besides adding a whole bunch of benefits I'm going to talk about in a second, is you've strengthened your network. You've made your network stronger, more resilient for storms, for leaves on trees, whatever might be causing you havoc. You've helped make your network a little bit better. The other thing that you can't see here that you start to learn when you work with your partners is there's a lot of capacity on the network. And I won't throw percentages out because I think it's dynamic, but I would tell you we have the analogy we use is we've got about a 20-lane highway that just opened up and only a few cars on it. So we've got a lot of capacity to start adding other equipment. We've got a lot to learn on the on-ramps and the off-ramps and how we're going to get those cars onto this new highway, but tons of opportunity that's emerging. So let's walk you through a couple of use cases. The first are the streetlights. As Brandon mentioned, we've deployed nearly 800 of them in 2 different towns, in Lombard and Bensenville, and this is where we had previously put the meters in a couple of years ago in our pilot. We picked those locations because they're a good representation of a lot of our municipalities. They also went into a place that we have a baseline of how the network performs. So we're looking to learn from the customers what they think of the new lights, but we're also looking to find out how they interact and impact the network traffic. So that is underway. Just briefly, what you do with these, if you follow the cursor, is you start with an LED street light. An LED street light today is about 60 to 65% more efficient than the mercury vapor and the sodium, high pressure sodium bulbs that we use. And then you add a smart control node. So moving to the right, you can see that control node. Today, the street lights have just basically an electric eye that measures brightness or darkness and turns the lights on or off. This node allows metrology. You can start to meter usage. It allows you to interact with the LED in a way that you can dim the lights, and you can uniquely control each light on the system. Moving to the right, they hop on the same network. That's some of the hardware there. And then it moves to the software portal. We are working with these municipalities to allow them to go in and to play with the software to see what they can do. And some of the early learnings are interesting. One of the towns is a little bit reluctant to randomly, we've talked about randomly dimming areas to save money. They're a little reluctant to do that right now because of liability. We're hoping we get them over the hump. The other municipality seems a little more aggressive. One of their comments to us was, we've got a lineup of car dealerships, and it's real bright there. We don't need the lights, so we can start to turn those off or dim those, and then on Sunday when the car dealership is closed, we'll turn those lights on. So we're trying to encourage them, now that you can meter these lights, to randomly dim, to ramp into the darkness, to ramp out of the darkness, and to take those 60 to 65% energy savings you get from LED, but to make them even more pronounced. The last part I would mention is you get, because you have the unique ability to address each street light, you get maintenance information. You know when a bulb is going to fail, and you can also control that light separately. So we're going to work with emergency responders. We can turn the lights off or on for them. One of the interesting stories when we talked with the Chicago Police Department is we said, hey, you can turn these lights real bright if you've got a crime area. And they told us their need was opposite of that, that a lot of their officers carry night vision goggles, their SWAT teams, and they want to be able to turn the lights off, to the point today that they take their guns and shoot the lights out in an area to go in there, which only results in more maintenance and repairs for the city crews that have to go replace those fixtures. So with this technology, you could control individual lights and turn them off. A couple of things we're working on, I would mention, is we have given, I mentioned turning the portals over to the municipalities. One of the things we're trying to decide in the future is that the model, or is the model that they would call us and we'll execute the dimming schedule? So it's really a control question. Do we want the municipalities in there sending dimming schedules and using our network, or do we want to maintain that control? And the beauty of a pilot is you get to ask those questions and learn those answers, and when you go full scale, I think you're in a heck of a lot better spot. And then moving to the next page, water meters. So we were approached by a town in the northern suburbs, and the comments were really interesting from them. So they're a pretty well-to-do suburb. Their water meters are nearing the end of life, and they basically approved a go-ahead by their town board to replace all their water meters and to turn them smart in a way that they can basically collect all the metering information. And their comment that I think really caught a lot of us was, hey, we're very concerned about who we partner with. You know, we're a small city. We're not technology experts. We're worried about getting connected with a company that might not be here 10 or 15 years from now if they have problems. And we know you as the utility, you depend on this network for your backbone, for your revenue. We're interested in partnering with you because we know 30 years from now you're in this with us. So we are working with them on a model to potentially use our network for their water meters so that they could collect their metering information. That's one example. There's another city that's talked to us, and they've heard about this, and they're asking if we would be interested in a services type of model where we would not only share the network, we would run analytics for them, we would do billing for them, we would offer up our CSRs that field electric calls today and basically outsource a lot of what they do to us. So this is very nascent right now. We're working it. There's lots of emerging models. There's lots of questions in regulatory space. Today, some people would tell you the customers bought and paid for the network that provides the electric metering and the DA, and that we can't profit on water meters. Some people would say, well, if it offers a great benefit to your customers, you might want to go that way too. So we're working it. We don't have all the answers, but the beauty of some of these pilots, as I said, you learn and you figure it out as you go. The last page just wraps this all together, and we like to think of the network as the iPhone, and we're encouraging people to develop apps that can ride on this network that can deliver value to our customers. One of my favorite brainstorming examples I'll close on was somebody that said, hey, those little infrared guns, if you've ever seen them, they shoot a little red dot and they can tell you the temperature of a vent, a wall, if the air conditioning's on. Those have gotten pretty inexpensive. You can buy one at a hardware store today for about $7. And that person said, what if we can put those in street lights, not every street light, but some street lights, and you can take a shot down at the pavement and measure pavement temperature. And if you could take pavement temperature and you knew it was 34, 35 degrees and you knew there was a warming trend, you could start to develop salting schedules. The city of Chicago, the number I've heard, drops about $20 million of salt on the streets every winter. And they do that without a lot of analytics, without a lot of thought. They do it just based on, I guess, guesses. And salt is a huge environmental issue. Salt is, besides tearing up concrete, erodes all of the sewers. It's an issue. It's getting more and more expensive. So people can work and dream up these problems. The problem statements need to come from the cities, I think. But it's just a tremendous, exciting time and lots of emerging opportunity that we think for the utility. So with that, Brandon, I will turn it back to you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Joe. And thank you for the overview and for being such a progressive customer and thinking broadly about how the network can benefit the citizens and not only the utility. Couple questions. So first off, I would like to open up the floor for questions, and please use the chat box to provide questions to PJ. One question that we got from the floor, Joe, was around the benefit to ComEd. ComEd has significant generation plants, and this is potentially costing you money. So this will be, could you talk a little bit about the revenue model and why ComEd would want to help communities save energy?
Yeah, so actually that's a little bit of a misconception. We are not a vertically integrated utility. We used to be, but that changed maybe more than 10 years ago. And it changed in a way that the nuclear plants that we did own at one time, the fossil plants, were spun off into a separate company. So today, ComEd is only a delivery company. And when you buy your power, if you pay $1 for a unit of power, we give 70 cents back to whoever you buy it from. We keep 30 cents. Part of that is fixed, and it's true that part of it is variable, and we're working, there's some legislation downstate. We're talking about potentially changing that and moving to a model that's more what I would call demand-based. So we're trying to work to change that a little bit, but I think the message that needs to be heard is we're not interested in protecting kilowatts. That's not our purpose anymore. It's a little bit of a legacy issue from the past.
Great, thank you. And maybe you could talk a little bit about why you chose streetlights as one of the first smart city applications that you're delivering.
Yeah, and I would answer that with two reasons, Brandon. The first is technically. I mentioned that it really strengthens our network. So we think there's a lot of benefits to using the streetlights. If you start to do water meters, other type of applications, having a big, robust network only helps. And a couple different models emerging. We own streetlights in some areas. We don't own them in others. So it tests the different business models that are emerging, and we're starting to have some traction with municipalities. The other reason we're doing it is I would argue that smart grid to date has really been a push by the utilities. I don't think you'd find customers were clamoring and saying, give me smart grid. Many didn't know what it is, and it was probably more of a push. And we're hoping to turn it to a pull by providing very visible benefits, pun intended, with streetlights, but visible benefits where the customers start to see other benefits of smart grid. They start to ask for more of it. We need to justify the spends that we're asking for our customers to make these investments. And then you can turn it around and liquidate it in the form of savings, right? So we think the customer benefit is a huge piece of this as well.
Great. And maybe you could talk a little bit, as part of that, you had a broad, it sounds like you did a broad scan of many different applications and prioritized down to 32 that were the best fit for ComEd. Could you talk a little bit about what those criteria were and how you stack ranked which applications you should be doing first?
Yeah, that's a work in progress, Brandon. We've got a ways to go. I would tell you one of the tools we used was to take the livability, workability, sustainability definitions, create a Venn diagram, and to see where those intersections are. And if you apply the definitions, you'll find some of the applications fit in one circle all by themselves. Some overlap. When you start to talk about street lights and water meters, they hit right in the sweet spot of all three. So they provide far-reaching, wide-reaching benefits. The other 32 we're trying to, so 2 of the 32 obviously are water meters and street lights. We're also trying to work on understanding from our customer and cities' perspectives what interests them. And one of the things they're hearing is it's not only infrastructure, but revenue. Revenue is very important, given a lot of the pension issues in Illinois and what some of the municipalities are going through with funding. They're saying find a way to increase our revenue with this technology. And smart signs or smart, I don't know if anybody's heard about smart signage, that's emerging. Today a lot of the signs are static, and what municipalities are starting to ask about is there a way to use the network to take a sign and have it say, for instance, street cleaning today, and then tomorrow Energy Central or Geico, and to find revenue in the form of advertising dollars. So I would tell you we're prioritizing internally, to summarize, what the sweet spot is, and then we're reaching out to the municipalities and saying these are some of the things we think are important that we're hearing around the world. What do you think are those? And we're very early in that journey. That's
great. And within that, when cities are coming to you, and also when you're approaching cities about deploying this or using the application, the network for other applications, what's the business model? How are you thinking about charging a city or charging citizens for use of the network?
Yeah. So the first example with streetlights, many of the suburban streetlights are owned by ComEd. So that's fairly straightforward. That model looks like us approaching the municipality, using energy efficiency dollars to buy down the existing asset, which may not be fully depreciated. So we purchase the stranded asset. We're able to then offer them a new tariff on the streetlights, which even though the streetlights cost a little more, they last longer. So the payments are flat to less for the streetlights, and the energy efficiency savings then finance any of the additional smarts. So we think that model is going to be a no-brainer for areas where we own the streetlights today. So that's one business model. Where we don't own the streetlights, the municipalities are free to pursue this on their own. I think we're going to start to hear, like we did with that water city, that it's not really their core competency, and maybe they want to leverage what we have to offer. So models that are emerging around there are more partnering up with equipment vendors or providers and trying to finance the projects with the energy efficiency savings. And we're talking to a couple municipalities about that, about bigger companies that are willing to finance it, maybe move that financing off the municipality's balance sheet, and again finance them with the savings. So those are the kind of the business models emerging with the streetlights. I think it's going to be kind of a menu approach and a whole bunch of potpourri. I don't think there's one set business model. I mentioned with water meters, people are coming at us with all kinds of different ideas. So we have not sorted through that. We're still working on it. We've talked about options that would include per unit type of pricing. We've talked about measuring the bandwidth and charging for the use of the network. We've talked about service models, and we're exploring many, many options. We're a little more advanced on streetlights and still learning a lot more on the others.
And makes sense. And are there regulatory changes that need to happen as well to unlock some of these other opportunities?
Perhaps. We are governed in Chicago by the Illinois Commerce Commission, so we're having some early discussions with them. I would tell you that if a municipality has, maybe water meters, they want to move to it, and it's going to cost, I'll just use round fake numbers here, but if they approach a vendor from scratch and that vendor says they can do it for $100, and ComEd says we can do it for 80 because we've got basically the sunk cost of a network and all its capacity. We're thinking that a model could emerge that those savings are shared, right? So ComEd will find a way to make a little money, which we don't do today, so it would require regulatory change, but the customers would benefit and the municipalities by the fact that this network is already sunk, has capacity, and they don't have to go deploy a new network. So I would tell you yes. What I can't tell you is where our regulators' heads are right now. This is all very new, and we're trying to educate them. We use, as you know, Brandon, I would tell others that Silver Springs has a display center in Willis Tower, Sears Tower for people that might know it as that. But we've got a great display center where we can bring them through and we can show them a lot of these technologies. They can touch it, they can see the software. It's invaluable. It's invaluable, and I would encourage, if anybody's thinking about that, to bring regulators. We've had all of our commission up there to see it, to understand it a little bit. But if they can touch it and feel it and understand it, I think it's going to make the path a lot easier.
Great. Well, we're getting a number of questions about specific applications, and so I might go into a little bit more detail on some of those. So there's a question about microgrids. Has ComEd explored and looked at microgrids, and is that an option to be able to add onto the network as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I talked a lot about the smart city stuff, and that's kind of the focus of this call. I would tell you there's all kinds of utility applications for the network. For example, we have today equipment called networks all underneath the street of Chicago, thousands of protectors and transformers that today are pretty much manually monitored by people that visit them maybe once a month. We have automatic throwover equipment that's got maybe a couple of feeders or lines that come in that sense when one is down and they throw over. Those tend to feed hospitals or high reliability customers. We have lights that are on top of transmission towers that are required to be on for airplanes, and there's FAA rules and requirements about how quickly they need to be replaced if a bulb burns out. So all of those type of instances, we've got pilots going on in each of those that are using the network to increase our visibility, to tell us that light is out, to tell us the status of the switches. So I didn't talk about that at all. Then if you move towards microgrid, we have a DOE grant. We're developing a controller to build a microgrid right outside of IIT. IIT has a 10 to 12 megawatt microgrid. That's one of the more robust microgrids in the world. And when we took a look at our microgrid plan in Chicago, I would tell you O'Hare Airport's 100 megawatts. The hospital district in Illinois is 140. They're too big for the technology around microgrids. So the reason we picked this area right outside of IIT was our view is that microgrids would be small but would need to cluster to get to those, to scale to get to those 100, 140 megawatt numbers. If you build a 140 megawatt microgrid, you might as well call it a macro grid, right? Our view would be that there'll be 14 10 megawatt microgrids that can start to connect and cluster. So we shared that view with the DOE, and we were awarded a grant that we're working on to build that controller. So when successful, in about a year or so, it'll be the first instance of a clustered microgrid in the world, and then we hope to take that and scale it. I would tell you there's legislation pending in Illinois. We've talked to the legislators about additional microgrids. We've put about 6 on the table, I believe. They include capabilities like water, transportation. I can share that stuff with people offline. But the network is front and center with the microgrids. We would need to control devices. We would need to have a very high level or resolute view and visibility to all equipment in the microgrid, and the Silver Springs network is going to be front and center to the operation of that.
Great. There's another question, Joe, about smart home and connecting devices inside the home, managing energy use and helping consumers get more information about how much energy and how usage is driving their bill. Is that something that that ComEd is exploring as well, and what are your thoughts on smart home applications on this same network?
Yeah, so I'm no expert there, but the meter works in a couple of different ways. We talk to the meter every day. We collect information on usage. Customers are starting to sign up for some offerings we have. One of them is a company called O-Power, and we can send them all kinds of information. We can compare their usage to their neighbors. We can tell them through a text that there's a spike in usage, perhaps there's a problem. So we're able to run some analytics that way, kind of remotely from what we get. There's also intelligence built into the meter. There's a chip, I believe it's called Zigbee, which can work the other way and can talk to equipment in the home. And we're starting to see some vendors and providers start to talk about different types of equipment and home automation. I wouldn't tell you that's our specialty. We're trying to encourage that market to develop. I've actually had an individual in our company approach me about trying to incubate some of this technology and to get it going. So I think it's an emerging market. I mentioned changing our rate structure from getting away from kilowatt hours to what we call a demand-based rate, and just the brief explanation of that is we would charge customers for their peak. And if you charge customers for their peak, you're incenting behavior that says if the biggest thing I have running is my air conditioner, I don't want anything else running at that time. And you need to start automating the home or providing a lot more information to customers, which is starting to drive this type of technology. So it's definitely an emerging market. I think it's a big opportunity. I wouldn't tell you that that's ComEd's specialty. We're hoping others are going to come in and fill that void.
Great. And then there are some questions, some further questions about the water pilot and the role of the utility in taking on some of the data delivery and data analytics around water. The first was questions around the impact of adding other applications. Have you measured the baseline to understand what's the impact of being and what's the capability to be able to support different applications on the network?
Yeah, so we've worked to prioritize what we have on the network today. So our AMI team obviously is front and center, and they've prioritized and said at a certain time of day we need absolute clearance to what we do today is ping meters for temperature, right? So we need to get that information. During weather events, we think we're going to block off any external use of the network because we need to have views of meters with last gasp. So I would tell you that we're working with Silver Springs to understand the capability of the traffic on the network. PG&E in California, I understand, has, better than I, Brandon, some 6 million meters on the network. We're going to put 4 million. We're starting to get warmed up to Silver Springs coaching and analytics that it's not going to cause an overdue burden on the network. But we are conservative, right? The network is our lifeline for revenue and building, and one of the reasons we're doing the pilot with the streetlights is to understand any traffic that might be added. But I think to date, the findings have actually been that the streetlights have helped the network. So hopefully that answered the question. I'm far from a network expert, though.
That's great, and I think.
Hey, Brandon, can I do a role reversal and ask you? I know you're a little more familiar, but you with Silver Springs, what have you seen with the network and how it behaves with streetlights?
Sure. So I think you talked about the 20-lane highway. We really feel like the opportunity of adding streetlights, it creates a high-speed network over the top of some of our existing electric meter deployments. The streetlight technology is based on Gen 4 and moving to Gen 5, so it's higher bandwidth and higher capacity. And so it does offer, and even in the simulation that you showed, it offers the ability for meters and other devices that are currently out on the network to find a higher speed and a great network asset to be able to connect to. We've seen, and I think there's been published reports of our network having significant headroom, well over 80% of headroom that's out on the field, if not more. And we think that streetlights offer the opportunity to connect to many city assets that might be challenging otherwise, and are a great way to be able to build an initial canopy for cities that don't have an existing network, or be able to add that overlay on within an electric utility service territory where there might be a meter mesh already in place.
Thank you.
So one of the other questions and one of the other applications, we talked a bit about water and microgrids and smart home, was the electric vehicles. And there's a question around ComEd's plans for electric vehicles and how it might leverage this network to be able to support those.
Sure. So We have we're a little slow in Illinois to adopt EVs. They're not taking off. Little bit of a chicken and the egg problem, we believe. Who goes first, buy the vehicle or the people that install the charging stations? We have, I mentioned this legislation we have in Illinois. We have put in there that we're willing to deploy 5,000 charging stations. That's based on what we call a coupling rate. A lot of the EV experts indicate that 20% is the appropriate coupling rate, which means for each 5 EVs there needs to be 1 charging station. The market is typically being filled by employers that want to offer free charging to their employees, or customers like a Walgreens or a Costco that want to lure you in and offer you free charging while you're there. But there's charging deserts in the form of multi-unit housing. A lot of public areas lack charging, so we're trying to spur that market by deploying them. What you can also do then is connect up and network the charging stations. So during periods of high peak, you can use them as a demand response tool and start to limit the amount you charge. You could slow down high-speed charging. You can also, it's got a ways to go, but you can also start to leverage the opposite, where it's not only vehicle or grid to vehicle, it's vehicle to grid, right? So can you start to use the batteries when you need perhaps frequency regulation? Can the customers benefit from that? But having a longer-term view and making sure you do it right is important, so that when that technology does emerge and the charging stations do mature and allow that the customers can enjoy those benefits of perhaps selling power from their vehicle back into the grid, perhaps powering their sump pump from their house, from their car. I would also add too, that's one area. Solar is starting to be talked about a lot more, and I know in Hawaii, Silver Springs and others have worked to tap the smartness of a lot of inverters, so that they can, when voltage becomes an issue, they can tap some of the reactive bandwidth of the inverters. So I know that Silver Springs is working to embed some of the technology in some of these smart inverters to make solar spread a little bit quicker.
Absolutely, and given there's such high penetration in some communities in Hawaii, and also more and more in California, that having that control to be able to manage the impact on the grid has really been critical from what we've seen. So we talked a little bit about solar and storage then, which was another question that had come in. There's also a question about data analytics, and not only using the data inside ComEd, but also making some of the data available to outside parties or developers. Can you comment a little bit about how ComEd is using the data that's being collected from the network to improve its own operations, and then also create new businesses and create value with other providers?
Yeah, I can't talk too much about the data. I think that's a work in progress. I would tell you that although ComEd collects data, it's not our data, it's our customers' data, and we're not free to make that available. I know a lot of people would say, let us see that data and let us offer, provide new offerings to customers. We've actually been working with the Commerce Commission, as I understand it, and they're trying to sort through. I think the current view is that it's a customer decision if they make that data available. So that's still a work in progress. As far as the analytics, the water is a biggie with water losses. There's houses today we've been talked to about that people go away, they're snowbirds, they go to warmer climates and come back to find their pipes were frozen and their houses are lost. And through some analytics, you can tell if water is running when it shouldn't. I believe the number I've heard is that 30% of all water is lost due to pipe issues or broken mains, and that are just not known about. And a lot of the roadmap for Silver Springs is starting to get to low power. One of the issues with water meters is you can't power up the device. It needs a external source of battery versus electric. And I know the Millenick and some of the new technology is starting to bridge that gap. Our water meter discussion, for the most part, has been just in the residential space. I know there's opportunity when you move towards the bigger supply lines in the city. They would love to be able to monitor those. That's where a lot of that loss is occurring. So 30% losses are a huge number. So that is an area we haven't gone yet, but I think with the technology starting to get there and the 20-year life on these devices are going to start to offer some benefits there.
Great. Well, why don't we transition a little bit into what it takes to make this type of a network come to life. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about the capabilities that a utility or a city need to be able to deploy a smart city platform or a smart energy platform.
Yeah, I think one of our observations, we've got a lot of people talking to us about smart cities, and we've been talking with other areas, including places in Europe. One thing you come to realize is agendas and priorities change in the world of politics, and many of the leaders in cities are short-term in office, and there needs to be a forcing function. There needs to be somebody that's in it for the long haul, and smart cities aren't going to strictly be a utility play. There's lots of partners that need to be at the table, but I do think the utility provides a longer-term, steady, persistent approach to just keep chipping away at these things. So I think the utility brings that unique perspective. I'd also argue that the utility is great asset managers. At ComEd, we've got millions of poles and hundreds of thousands of transformers and thousands of substations. We maintain everything we have. If we don't maintain it, it's because we've done cost-benefit decisions on whether that maintenance has value. So I think the utility is uniquely positioned as asset managers to understand a lot of these assets that are being deployed. We also have a low access or a low cost of capital or access to capital if we choose to go there to make these investments. I think in the future world, I don't know if that's 20 years or 50 years from now when a lot of distributed generation is out there, and it's going to happen. It's really a question of when. In that world, I think utilities are going to need to make a shift. There's going to be less investment in big iron, if you will, big substation equipment. Today we put that equipment in and we depreciate it and earn over 30 years. And I think utilities are looking for growth opportunities and the ability maybe to move into this other space like streetlights or EV stations or smart cities. We know those are going to be around 50 years from now versus some of this equipment it might not. And I think a lot of utility executives are starting to worry about stranding these long-term investments, and where else can they deploy some of their capital.
And so you mentioned earlier that changing some of the finance schemes, finance approach, so that it's easier for cities to be able to, deploy this technology or get the benefit is a key driver in making smart cities real. Is that a role for the utility? Is that something that ComEd or others would consider?
Yeah, I think we can bring partners to the table. I don't think we've closed our mind to how that works. So I think there's some models that we might entertain being the provider. I think there's models we want others to come in. We're not going to finance streetlights that I'm aware of, but there's big vendors that are willing to do that. So I think, Brandon, the word there is flexibility. Early in the game. Again, I keep saying that because we don't have it figured out, and it's one of the reasons we're having a call today on this, right, is to get some of this stuff out there and start educating people. So I would tell you flexibility is the key word there.
Absolutely, and I think it does seem like there's very different models that are being pursued in many different markets, but I think that ComEd has had a really winning strategy with the communities that you're working with. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how you've partnered with the Bensonville and Lombard for the streetlight programs, and then also as you're developing your water offering, what are some of the lessons that you've learned in working with city and municipal governments, and then also how ComEd was successful in being able to deliver new services for them?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest lessons is I don't want this to sound wrong, very needy. Cities don't have a lot of extra resources available in the form of money or people. So they are entirely dependent on us to deliver. So with the streetlights, there's been a lot of education that's needed to take place. It starts fairly remedial to the point now we have them, we've handed over basically a VPN type of dongle where they can log into our network. So we've had to do a lot of hand holding, a lot of working with them to get to them to understand what's out there. It was fairly easy to convince them to go this way because the I think some of the economic benefits on the energy savings speak for themselves. So that was easy to get them there, but they do need a lot of direction, a lot of hand-holding. Early on, the people really like the white light. We're starting to learn. There's been a couple of issues or complaints where people have said it's too bright. You know, it shines in my bedroom. Well, the beauty of it is you can uniquely address that light, dim it a little bit, and the problem goes away. And people are obviously very receptive and liking that idea. The LED lights tend to be a little more direct too. They're not. There's less glare. People sometimes think they're dimmer. Glare, I understand, is not defined as the perception of light, but I think for the most part, people are liking it. The other thing I had mentioned, the other big learning is they're reluctant to do something different. They're reluctant to randomly dim their lights in neighborhoods to save more money. When I say dim, I'm not talking about turn the bright lights half dim and allow crime to go, but you can go 5 or 10%. You can just very slightly dim these to the point people I don't think would even notice that they're dimmed. But there's just a general reluctance to go there because of liability issues if somebody was burglarized at the time those lights were dimmed a little bit. I think they'll get over the hump. One town is a little more forward than the other, but pilots are wonderful for us in the utility space before we scale up and go big. So we're learning a lot.
And maybe you could talk a little bit about the type of capabilities that ComEd has had to build internally. It sounds like certainly a public relations and a government relations function has been critical as part of this project, but also maybe some of the increased technical roles and capabilities within ComEd that you've had to develop, not only on the smart grid journey, but also as you get more and more into smart cities.
Yeah, so my smart grid team is 8 people, which I would argue is a luxury compared to peer utilities across the country. So we do have engineers and people that are capable of looking at this. But the Smart City Initiative has required a team of about 30 because what you'll quickly learn in this space is it's not so easy to go put up a street light. It touches the rates people, it touches the IT folks, it touches the governmental affairs. So it requires a huge cross-functional team. In front and center with that, you mentioned our governmental affairs people had to work with mayors, with state representatives to get them to understand how this all works. I would tell you the problem's starting to reverse now. Early on it was communicating benefits, and now we're starting to get a lot of inquiry about pick us next. And we just don't have the bandwidth and the cash, frankly, to go deploy everywhere. But municipalities are saying, pick me, pick me. We have had to staff up a little bit internally. We've had to build big teams. We are leaning on lots of people from all around the company to figure this stuff out. It's new. We don't have tariffs for a lot of it. We don't have tariffs for what we'll do with water meters. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's great, and it's certainly it's a big investment and a big focus area for ComEd. Could you talk a little bit about the business case? Obviously, it sounds like there's a strong vision from the top, but how is the business case internally to make some of these investments and to be thinking so proactively about smart cities?
Yeah, I think the answer is we're still trying to understand the benefits and how you price some of those benefits. We're obviously studying and getting real-time information now from the streetlights. I think the streetlights are a altogether different issue just because the energy savings of the LED lights are so strong. Where we really need to quantify those benefits are the softer things, the additional savings around dimming. Because honestly, somebody can go and just put up a dumb LED street light and save money, right? So how do you wring out those other benefits? And we're trying to use the pilot to extract real information to inform that business case to build it up. Because we do need to justify the increased cost of the technology and the smart nodes that are up there. So we do need those things that honestly the municipalities fighting us a little on dimming. We need them to do that to help justify the business case of the extra gadgets we've added. With water, we've invoked a third party to come in to try to do a bottom-up business case. You need to understand not only what it costs you, but what somebody that came in and built this thing from scratch would charge. I mentioned that if we've got the sunk cost of a network, what would it cost for somebody else to come in and do it from scratch, and what's that delta? And that's really, the starting point of the benefits for the customers. So we're doing that with water right now, and where we'll go with that is once we understand the value proposition, the business case, then we'll figure out the regulatory strategy. If it's a slam dunk and the savings are huge, I think it's an easier sell in regulatory space. If they're a little more marginal, maybe we need a Smart Cities LLC group, and we start to do it and form a little competitive wing out of our parent. So we are trying to learn from the pilot in real time, and then trying to develop business cases on these other processes or these other technologies.
And it sounds like a lot of that will depend on the adoption from cities. And maybe you could talk a little bit about how it sounds like cities are pulling you in, but I'm sure there's also kind of some on-the-ground effort to work with cities on what they need and their next applications and frankly, what the business case is to them. How have you approached cities, and what's been your engagement model with them?
Yeah, so to date, I would tell you it's been a little scattered. We've put a street light in here. We're looking to put a water meter there. Where our approach is starting to change is we think there's benefit in approaching a city and saying, hey, let's talk about Smart City USA. Let's deploy every technology we have in your backyard. Let's build it to scale in a given area rather than all broken apart like we've been approaching. So we've got a team trying to look at that, which would include a lot of those. I mentioned 32 different technologies we have. So we're looking to probably go to a little smaller municipality to do that. The city of Chicago is too big. So that's one approach. I would tell you, with the city of Chicago, we've joined a consortium. The name of that is called UI Labs. That's the bigger parent, and then they have a smaller group called CityWorks. And we've tried to bring a bunch of partners in. That was recently announced. Companies to the likes of Siemens, Accenture, Microsoft, ComEd are all partners. And the approach there is to try to get the city folks that are familiar with the problems to bring those problem statements to us. Anybody can innovate, but I think the universal is the problem statements need to come from within or from the people that are closest to those problems. So the theory of this UI Labs, or the approach, is to get the city folks in there to come in, talk about their problems, and the partners can then innovate and try to deliver solutions to the city. And if successful, hopefully can scale those up across cities around the world, not only just Chicago, so that the partners can then obviously profit commercially. The city benefits from its backyard being a test lab to develop these new applications.
That's a great point. And I think the public-private partnerships like UI Labs are a great opportunity to help cut across the different departments within the city as well, so that they can coordinate and have common service providers understanding what's the best solution, and then not designing just for the water department or the traffic department, but thinking holistically around what's the right solution for a city. So I think that's a great point that you brought up. Yeah.
What you tend to find is the city services are siloed, right? And a lot of the solutions break across those silos. And when you start to share data and information, you can start to do things that benefit multiple departments and the entire city.
Great. Well, I think, Joe, thank you very much. I think we're coming to the top of the hour, but really wanted to thank you for your perspective and for also helping us on the smart grid and smart city journey and thinking about what's the right way to work with utilities as well as work with cities to deliver a platform that can support all of the different applications that are being considered.
Yeah, and Brandon, I would just add, obviously we don't have all of the answers. We have some. We're early on the journey, but this is going to get figured out by lots of people in lots of cities, and we're only going to be successful to the extent we all communicate, work together, and collaborate on this.
Thank you,
Great.
speakers.
Well, with that, PJ, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, Joe. Great presentation. For our audience, we hope you've enjoyed today's discussion. As you log off, please take a moment to complete our survey. Give us your feedback so we can continue to provide you with quality content. Thank you for attending, and this does conclude today's presentation.